This is a Mitsubishi Mirage. I think it's a 2015, but it might as well be a 2017, 2018. They really haven't changed it all that much, and that isn't the problem. Anyway, the problem is that no matter what year you get, it feels like it's from 1996, and that's just one of the reasons why this is the worst new car you can buy. Yes, this is the Mitsubishi Mirage, which is the cheapest new car you can buy. I say that not because of the starting price. It starts at $14,000. Which actually puts it on par with the Chevy Spark and more expensive than the Nissan Versa. No, I say it's the cheapest new car you can buy because it is the cheapest new car you can buy, and honestly it probably is the least expensive new car. Yes, the Versa is technically cheaper, but Mitsubishi dealers are absolutely desperate and they are practically giving these things away right now on Auto Trader. There are 72 brand new Mitsubishi Mirage is listed for sale for under $10,000, and remember, I told you the starting price of this car was $14,000, so that's a discount of almost 40%, a 40% discount on a car that costs only $14,000. So today I'm going to show you why this car is the cheapest and the least expensive and the worst new car you can buy. First, I'm gonna show you all of its perks and its feature, and then I'm gonna take it out on the road and see how this thing drives, and then of course I'm going to give it a Doug score. And for more of my thoughts on the Mirage, click the link below to go to autotrader.com/oversteer, where I've written a column about this car. Now I'm gonna start up here with my Mirage's biggest quirks, and that would be its engine. This is a tiny little subcompact car, so what powers that? You're probably thinking I have 4-cylinder 100 horsepower. Not even close. This is a 72 horsepower 1.2-liter 3-cylinder. That's an engine you can buy in a new car today. This thing makes a Honda Fit look like a muscle car, and listen to this car weighs only 20 pounds. I'm serious, just a little bit more than a Lotus Elise, and yet because of this tiny little engine it does your 2 in 11.7 seconds. It gets pretty good fuel economy, 37 miles per gallon city and 44 miles per gallon highway. But I mentioned the Fit earlier. That car gets only 3 miles per gallon worse, and it is a 130 horsepower and does 0 to 60 inches 8.5 seconds, so the Fit doubles this car's horsepower. It takes 3 seconds off the 0 to 60 time, and the fuel economy penalty is only 3 miles per gallon, and it only gets worse from there. This engine is so small and puny and pathetic that if you take a look inside and you look down, you can actually see the ground from above the engine. That's my foot that I'm waving around. You can see all the way through the engine to the pavement. Needless to say, you open up the hood and a Hellcat and you can really see the ground. Next, I'm moving on to the interior of the Mirage and my personal favorite ultra cheap car Mirage feature. How about this? The car is off right now, as you can see, and yet I can turn the wheel. The Mirage doesn't have a steering wheel lock when it's off. This has to be the last new car without that feature. Everyone else has put that in for anti-theft purposes, but not the Mirage. It's kind of impressive. Speaking of things that the Mirage doesn't have, there are no map lights in this car. In fact, there's no rear dome light. There's just one dome light right up here. If you want individual map lights so you can see maybe a map while you're driving, you have to pay extra. Also, the Mirage's sound system leaves something to be desired. There are only 4 speakers, 2 in the front doors, 2 in the rear doors. That's all you get now. Although the Mirage is light on some features, it has more than you'd expect. For example, it has power windows, and the driver can control all 4 windows, front and rear, from the driver's door panel, just like in a normal car. But it doesn't have cruise control. That's an option. It has power locks, but it doesn't have Bluetooth. That would be an option. It even has power mirrors, but it doesn't have a center console. You know how in your car you have a little box between the seats? Yeah, not in this thing. All you get in this thing is the parking brake and a cup holder, and you should think you're lucky star you get that cup holder. Now moving on to the stereo. The Mirage doesn't have a USB port for music. That's also an option, although it does have an O jack, so you can plug your phone in and listen to music through like any good car. If it came from 2007. Something else I'm surprised about, the Mirage has a tachometer. Even though this is an automatic, that's great. They gave us a tachometer, although I suspect it's not from their generosity but rather their desire not to make 2 gauge clusters, one for a stick shift car and one for an automatic. Here's something it doesn't have. There are sun visors, of course, to shield yourself in the sun, driver and passenger, but only the driver side gets a visor mirror if you're in the past or the Mirage. Well, you're not going to be able to look at yourself. Another odd thing, let's take a closer look at that gauge cluster. Why does the speedometer go up to 140 inches? A car that has 72 horsepower, this thing would be lucky to break 90. My guess Mitsubishi is reusing this speedometer from another model and they were too cheap to make one for the Mirage. Something I'm truly impressed at the Mirage has is variable intermittent wipers. Most really cheap cars just have on, off, and one intermittent setting, and you can't change the speed, but you can in the Mirage. But moving over to the stock on the other side of the steering wheel, that would be the one for the turn signals, you'll see that there's a little switch for the fog lights, the front fog lights and the rear fog light only. There's a little bit of a problem, this Mirage isn't equipped with a front fog lights or a rear fog light, so you just have that switch. You can play with it while you drive if you want to. Next, moving on to the back seats, the Mirage has floor mats. The front ones say Mirage on them, and it even has rear floor mats, which is actually impressive for a car like this. Not so impressive the rear seat in this car. The bottom half of the rear seat has no contours at all, it's just one giant slab of foam. They didn't even try to change the design of the bottom half of the rear seat to make it look like it has contours so it looks comfortable. It's just one bench. Needless to say, if you're in the back seat of a Mirage on a long trip, good luck getting comfortable. This back seat is not designed to accommodate your butt or your hips. Instead, it's just one flat bench that's designed to make you sit there and think about how you wish the driver had purchased a better car. Next, moving on to the cargo area in the Mirage, this car has something that might impress you. It certainly impressed me. Mainly, it has folding seats. You can just put them down. That one goes down to most really cheap cars don't have that. But then we get to the drawback, namely the carpeting back here. It's absolutely atrocious on the back of the seats. The carpeting has no qualms, just revealing the foam. You can just stick your hand in there and feel around the seat foam, and the piece of carpeting they put on the cargo area is so pathetically ill-fitting it doesn't look like it even belongs back here. If there's ever any doubt that the Mirage is a really cheap car, look in the cargo area. Not that there would be. And now, beyond that cargo area carpeting, there are some other interesting oversights in the Mirage, starting for example with the interior door locks. Now, in every other car, when the door is locked on the inside, the door lock shows the same color as the body panel, and it does that in the Mirage. The problem is that in the Mirage, when the door is unlocked, it also shows the same color. All the other cars have a little red indicator showing that the door is unlocked, but not in the Mirage. Apparently they couldn't afford the red, so regardless whether the door is locked or unlocked, it just looks pretty much the same, especially at night when you can't tell the difference in the design of the lock and unlock pieces. You just have to kind of know that's an odd place to cheap out, and yet Mitsubishi did it. Another unusual Mirage oversight is the climate controls, namely every single time you change the climate controls, do anything with the climate controls, they beep. Take a listen. I've never seen anything like that before except on cars with capacitive touch climate controls where they beep to give you a little bit of feedback so you know you actually did something. But these are actual buttons and yet they beep like you're setting a microwave. No one wants this, and yet if you have a Mirage you're stuck with it. Another oversight in this car, although I suspect it's one Mitsubishi knows about but just doesn't care about, the sheer number of exposed screws and bolts you can see throughout this car. For example, take a look here in the door jamb, you can see a couple, and then on the tailgate near the latch you can see a few more. You never see these in any other cars, but nowhere is this more apparent than the seat rails. Take a look down here. Every other car does their very best to try to hide this with plastic or leather or anything, but the Mirage is like, yep, you get seat rails, you get a problem with that. Now, speaking of those seat rails, underneath the seats on the floor between the seat rails, Mitsubishi has cut a hole in the crappy carpeting for some plastic part with a clearly visible part number that's just stuck there. You can't pick it up. I don't know what it is, but it's down there and it's really visible. No other car would leave this part visible so that everyone could see it, but then again, no other car is the Mitsubishi Mirage. Another interesting interior item I noticed later on, the center climate vents can't be closed. You can close the vents on the left and the right side of the cabin, but the ones in the middle have no mechanism to close them like every other car has. If you want them off, you'll have to turn off the climate control entirely. But my very favorite Mirage oversight comes here in the front end. That would be the hood panel gap. with the bumper. Now if you take a look at this panel gap, you'll notice that it starts off very flat like every other car, flat, and then it goes along and it takes sort of a little bit of a hill and then it goes back down and it continues along flat. Now Mitsubishi will never ever admit this, but let me tell you why I think this is. I think it's because Mitsubishi makes their badges in only one size, and so they decided to change the hood line in the front so they didn't have to make a different badge just for this car, and that is the ultimate example of cheapening out each signing the sheet metal, because it's easy to do that while the car is being designed rather than simply making the badge just a little bit smaller. And now, every time you look at the front of a Mitsubishi Mirage, you'll be left to wonder, is that why it curves up like that? Next up we move on to the door handles. Now every single other car has abandoned door handles you can only open from the bottom in favor of door handles that you can pull open from the top or the bottom. It makes it easier to get in the car and it helps prevent freezing. It will not surprise you to learn that the Mirage has not gotten those door handles yet. It still has the old school 90s door handles where you stick your hand under and open the door. And next up we got to talk about the Mirage's tires. There are a lot of cars with small tires on the market, but these have to be the smallest. They are 165 with 14-inch tires, which are just absolutely puny. Now people are gonna write it and say, well, 994 Civic has smaller tires than that. Yeah, but your 94 Civic isn't a 2017 model. These tires are ridiculously small. I can get my whole head around them. Needless to say, don't take your Mirage autocrossing. Finally, two interesting things about the rear of the Mirage. Number one, this car doesn't come with a backup camera. They're gonna be federally mandated next year, but I guess Mitsubishi is gonna wait until that regulation kicks right. And now you can get the Mirage for the backup camera. It's optional. Now every other automaker has integrated the backup camera into the design of the tailgate of the license plate, not Mitsubishi. Mitsubishi, you just kind of sticks it there so you can really tell the difference between Mirages with a backup camera and one without. There is no attempt at style with that thing. Another interesting thing about the rear of this car is the third brake light. I absolutely love this. When you press the brakes at night, I'm sure the third brake light does a good job of showing the people behind you that you're stopping, but it also completely illuminates whatever you have in the cargo area. It's like it's shining a red light under your cargo area every time you push the brakes. I've seen cars where you can see that the brake lights are on when you're sitting in the driver's seat, but this is something completely different. It's almost like there's a red light inside your vehicle every time you put on the brakes at night. Now you look at all that stuff, you might be thinking, what kind of a car company would make all those weird oversights and strange decisions? I can tell you exactly what kind of a car company, because I have communication from Mitsubishi in the form of this car's owner's manual. Now I opened this thing to a random page and it happened to be the page important facts to know in case of an accident. I will read you the very first sentence. We hope you will never be involved in an accident, but there is always that potential danger. Thank you so much, Mitsubishi. It just touches me that you care. I really appreciate that helpful settings. Now further down on that very same page, under something labeled Genuine Mitsubishi Motors Parts, it says Genuine Mitsubishi Motors replacement parts are your guarantee that your vehicle will have all the advantages and maintain the style and protection of a brand new Mitsubishi Motors, not Mitsubishi Motors vehicle, and not just Mitsubishi of a brand new Mitsubishi Motors. So if you want your Mitsubishi Motors to look good, and I think we all agree a nice Mitsubishi Motors is crucial for this world, then you have to get Genuine Mitsubishi Motors parts, because they will keep your Mitsubishi Motors looking like a Mitsubishi Motors. So those are all the corpse of the Mirage. Now it's time to find out if the driving experience is as bad as the interior and the exterior and the powertrain and the build quality and the brand image. Alright, driving the Mirage. Now I should mention I rented this car using Turo. I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Turo is this company. It's like Airbnb for cars. It lets you rent other people's interesting cars instead of your typical standard rental cars. You might wonder, why have I chosen a Mirage if I could have rented something actually interesting? And I just wanted to see what this car was like, and honestly the stuff you saw before wasn't so bad. This is sort of a tale of two cars. The interior and all that stuff, it's not great of course, but it's not that bad. It's better than I expected. The driving experience, I've been driving this thing around for a couple days, is worse than I expected. By far the biggest problem is the tire noise, the road noise, the wind noise. I was on the highway last night in this car with the windows up going 60 miles an hour and there's just wind coming in, and not a lot, but I mean this is a car that's not the only problem. The tire noise is massive. It's unbelievable to me how much noise these tires make. They're so small you'd think they'd be so inoffensive and little, and then there's the noise from the powertrain. This is a 1.2 liter, 3-cylinder, how is it this loud? It's in Cranberry that was 40 miles an hour that I got a few there. It took that long, it's making that much noise, and I'm only going 40. Those two things are by far the biggest problem with this car, that the tire noise. The car is just poorly constructed. The interior and stuff, like I said, is better than I was expecting it to be. It doesn't. If I thought it was gonna be falling apart and shaky and jiggly, and it's not that bad. Paneling inspires absolutely zero confidence. It's vague, it's really vague. It feels like you're sitting on top of the car and the steering as opposed to in it, which is something that happens sometimes in large SUVs, but I would not expect from a tiny little economy car like this. Acceleration is tremendously poor, 0 to 60 in 11.7 seconds. I mean, honestly, it feels slower than that to me. My Defender is about that, and this feels slower than my Defender, which is no easy feat. The other thing that's so bad about driving this car, really bad bumps. And then I took that a little fast, but not over 20. That was a train track, and it's so bad, man, at only the feel over bumps. I mean, I'm going to the point where I'm like I'm gonna stand me out, like I'm SIA. I see a drainage then or whatever, I'm gonna kind of go around it because it's just so rough. But also the sound, that I mean, it all is just so terrible. California, there's these little lane marker bumps everywhere because they just spend an enormous amount of money on everything, and like here, they just rock the car. This is one of those cars you start to fall asleep. You go over those things, not only will you wake up, but you'll think that you've just run over a deer. Now when you're just sitting here, the quality is not as bad as you'd expect. The steering wheel is very ugly and it has no buttons on it, and it's kind of a laughable thing, but the center snack is actually not so bad. It's not stylish, but I mean, you push it and it's not like it jiggles. There's also not squeaks or rattles in this car. Even driving over those bumps, like you hear the tires and the suspension, but you don't really hear a lot of noise you know from stuff that's rattling or squeaking. I think the problem with the car is more along the lines of the driving experience, right? Like the acceleration, the handling, the turning, the noise, the sound, the wind rush. It's those things where the car really starts to fall behind, and it's those things where you can tell why this car is so much cheaper than a Honda or a Toyota or something like that. Those cars engineer out a lot of the drawbacks typically associated with tiny cars. They've done a better job of making them more comfortable. You hear less blah blah blah, and that's what they spend money on, and that's why those cars are more expensive. And so that's the Mitsubishi Mirage. It is truly the worst car on sale today, and yet I understand why people buy it. A few months ago I was having dinner with some friends of mine who worked for an automaker, and the subject of ultra cheap new cars came up, and they totally changed my perspective on them. While you or I look for performance or driving experience or styling or brand name or features, they told me that the kind of people who buy cars like this have one goal in mind. They work at the kind of job where they have to show up or else they might get fired. They're living paycheck to paycheck, and they simply need basic, cheap, reliable transportation. Yes, the Mirage is a bad car by car enthusiast standards, and frankly even by objective, normal people standards. But remember, I told you there are dozens of these things listed for sale on Auto Trader for under 10 grand. Now if you or I were buying a car with a $10,000 budget, we'd probably buy some fun used car like an E30 or an Audi S4. I would buy an Isuzu Via Cross and join my local Isuzu Via Cross community, but we know that our fun used cars aren't exactly reliable, and honestly it's hard to find a reliable used car for under 10 grand. Hondas and Toyotas at that figure are usually many years old, way out of warranty with a lot of miles on them, but this car is a brand new vehicle with a 5-year bumper-to-bumper warranty and a 10-year powertrain warranty for $9,000 some, and you can get financing for it pretty easily, that's a huge deal if you don't care about styling and driving experience and features in Bluetooth audio and blind spot cameras, and you just want your car to start every time you turn the key and move every time you put it in gear. Of course this is a Mitsubishi, so we're not really sure it can actually do that, but You get my point anyway. Now it's time for the Doug score, starting with the weekend categories. And styling, the Mirage is bland, dull, inoffensive but not heinously ugly, and it gets nearly a 3 out of 10. Acceleration 0 to 60 comes in 11.7 seconds, and I don't think anyone would argue with a 1 out of 10. Handling is acceptable in this price range, but compared to the wide array of actually good cars, it's skittish and troublesome, especially at higher speeds, and it gets a 2 out of 10. Cool factor couldn't possibly be more obvious. Few vehicles are less cool than the Mirage, and it earns a 1 out of 10. Same deal for importance. This is a throwaway car, and there will be none of these left in like 9 years, much like the Suzuki Esteem or the Hyundai Excel, and it gets a 1 out of 10 added up. And the total weekend score is just 8 out of 53 points, higher than the bare minimum, and the single lowest weekend score I've ever given out. In case it isn't clear, I wouldn't want to drive one of these on the weekends. As for the daily score, starting with features, the Mirage isn't good for a modern car, but it's not as bad as some of the classics I've reviewed. It does, for example, have that jack, and it gets a 3 out of 10. Next up is comfort. The Mirage is harsher than it should be, and it wouldn't be a joy on long trips, but it's acceptable, I guess, and it gets a 4 out of 10. Next up is quality. In the Mirages is poor. Interior materials are bad, and I suspect reliability won't be what are hoping for, and I'm giving it a 3 out of 10. Practicality, however, is good. It has surprisingly good cargo space with the seats folded at 47 cubic feet, and fuel economy is strong, so it gets a 7 out of 10. And then there's value. The Mirage is a new car for around 10 grand with a good warranty, and that alone means it's not gonna be below average, but unfortunately it has few other benefits besides incredibly low pricing, and it gets just a 6 out of 10. And it up in the total daily score is a reasonably respectable 23 out of 50, which isn't so bad. It also means I'd rather daily drive a Mirage than an 05 Maserati Quattroporte, which is true. Add it all up, and the total Doug score is 31 out of 100, which is the second lowest score, yet worse than the Trabant, and just ahead of the Izetas, the Trabant, the Yugo. Those are interesting bad cars, and that's why they score a little higher. The Mirage is just a bad car. But moving over to the stock, on the other side of the steering wheel, the turn signals, you'll see that there's a little loop of fog light, with only one problem: this particular McCoy seats, which usually you don't see on really cheap cars. They fold. In fact,